Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, in a kingdom surrounded by lush green forests and sparkling rivers, there lived a princess named Snow White. Her skin was as fair as freshly fallen snow, her lips as red as the ripest cherry, and her hair as black as a raven's wing. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her beloved. Snow White had a heart that overflowed with kindness. She greeted everyone with a smile, helped anyone in need, and had a gentle laugh that made even the grumpiest royal guards smile. Snow White's life, however, was far from easy. Her stepmother, the queen, was proud and beautiful, but also cruel and jealous. She could not bear that Snow White's beauty and goodness made others admire her more than the queen herself. Each morning, the queen would look into her magical mirror and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And each day the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are fair indeed, but Snow White is even fairer than you." This answer filled the queen with envy, and her jealousy grew like a shadow across the castle halls. The queen devised many plans to harm Snow White, each more cunning than the last. Snow White, unaware of the dangers, continued her daily routines with kindness, helping servants, singing to the birds, and playing with the palace animals. She would often wander into the gardens, admiring the flowers and butterflies, sharing gentle words with every creature she met. Her laughter echoed like the sweetest chime of a bell across the stone courtyards. One day, the queen could no longer bear the thought of Snow White living happily while she felt overshadowed. She called for a huntsman and ordered him to take Snow White into the forest, far from the castle, and, well, the queen's words were cruel and chilling. But the huntsman, a kind-hearted man who had seen Snow White's goodness, could not carry out the evil plan. He told Snow White to flee into the deep forest and promised that he would return safely. Snow White ran, her heart pounding, the sunlight filtering through the tall trees, her dress brushing against ferns and wildflowers. She had never been so scared in her life, but she trusted that goodness would guide her through. As she wandered through the forest, she discovered a small, quaint cottage tucked among the trees. Smoke curled gently from its chimney, and a soft garden of vegetables and flowers surrounded it. Curious, Snow White peeked inside and saw 7 tiny beds, 7 little chairs, and 7 little bowls on a table. Everything seemed perfect and orderly, as though someone loved this place very much. She felt a sudden warmth in her heart, imagining it could be her safe haven. Meanwhile, the 7 dwarfs, who were miners and gentle souls, returned home from their day of work in the mountains. They were surprised to find Snow White sleeping in one of their beds. At first they were startled, but Snow White awoke with a kind and soft smile, explaining her plight without fear. She spoke with honesty and warmth, telling them about the queen and her cruel jealousy. The dwarfs, impressed by her goodness and courage, offered her a home with them. Snow White gratefully accepted, helping around the cottage, singing while she cooked, and cleaning with cheerful energy. Back in the castle, the queen asked her mirror again, and as always, it confirmed her fears. Snow White was still the fairest. The queen's envy turned to rage, and she devised her most devious plans yet. She disguised herself as an old peddler and went into the forest with a poisoned apple, tricking Snow White into taking a bite. Snow White fell into a deep sleep, the cottage filled with silence, the dwarfs' cries echoing in the trees. Yet even in this dark moment, the dwarfs' love and care did not waver. They built a crystal coffin to preserve her beauty and kept vigil, knowing that goodness and love had power beyond the queen's jealousy. One day a prince, who had heard of Snow White's kindness and courage, arrived at the cottage. He was captivated by her gentle beauty and her brave, loving heart. He leaned down and kissed her, and by the magic of goodness and true love, Snow White awoke. The dwarfs cheered, and even the birds and animals seemed to dance in joy. Snow White forgave the queen, not out of weakness, but because her heart understood that envy and hatred could only harm the one who held it. Snow White returned to the kingdom with the prince, and the queen, realizing that cruelty and jealousy had no lasting power, faded from her former strength. Snow White's life was filled with laughter, kindness, and generosity. She ruled the kingdom with fairness, sharing her goodness with all, and showing that a heart full of love was more powerful than any spell, mirror, or envy. And so, Snow White's story reminds us, goodness always triumphs over envy and jealousy. Even when others try to harm us out of jealousy, staying kind, honest, and courageous will bring light and happiness into our lives. Moral: goodness overcomes envy and jealousy.